History remembers the Battle of the Little Bighorn as Custer's last stand, a story told by the losing side. For generations, the only accounts were from the soldiers who weren't there, and the theories of historians who can only guess. But what happens when the story is told by the victors, not by generals or historians, but by the warrior who lived it? My name is not in your textbooks, but I was there. I saw the chaos, I felt the fear, and I made a choice on that battlefield that has echoed through my life ever since. This is not a legend. This is an eyewitness account of the fight, the tragedy, and the day I took a trophy from the field so unusual it became a story of its own. The day I scalped the soldier with the yellow beard. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. A noise shattered my sleep. It was a sound that meant danger. My brother, Yellow Hair, and I were on our feet in an instant. Chaos had seized the camp. The distant crack of gunfire sent us running from the trees for a better view. The attack was coming from the village's upper end. Our people were scattering in every direction. The air was thick with screams, shouts, and the desperate calls of mothers searching for children. "Soldiers are here!" We sprinted to our lodge. I grabbed my lariat and revolver, then raced for the grazing grounds. I found 3 young herders and shouted the news. Without a word, they leaped onto their ponies and vanished toward the camp, just as Bald Eagle's voice roared for the horses. Exhausted from the run, I trudged back. My father, scarred from many battles, already had my favorite horse ready. I tore off my old clothes, pulling on new breeches and a fine shirt. I swapped my worn moccasins for beaded ones. My father held the horse steady. "Hurry!" I painted my face carefully, a blue-black circle filled with red and yellow. I had no time to braid my hair. I just tied it back, seized my weapons, and leaped onto my horse. I galloped after the other warriors. A thick dust cloud hung in the air, but I followed the surge of riders. We swarmed past the Oglala camp, where hundreds of us surrounded the soldiers, answering their relentless fire with a storm of arrows. We flanked them, cutting off their retreat, driving them into the trees. Most had fled. We pressed in, showering the timber with arrows. Gunfire answered, but we held fast. More warriors arrived, sealing the grove. Fallen soldiers dotted the grass. The end was near. As Sioux advanced with torches, the soldiers suddenly burst from the trees on horseback. I was right there. I wheeled my horse and spurred into a frantic sprint with the others. But they weren't attacking. They were fleeing for the river across the open valley. After a stunned moment, we gave chase. A tide of Sioux joined, and I was swept to the front. Their mounts were exhausted. Ours were swift. I fired 4 shots, unsure if they hit. A Sioux warrior nearby sunk an arrow into a soldier's skull. Another found his shoulder. He fell. More soldiers tumbled from their saddles, struck down by arrows, spears, and stone clubs. Our war songs mixed with taunts. Little Bird and I targeted one soldier in a trailing war bonnet. We flanked him, whipping his horse. It felt cowardly to shoot, so I saved my bullets. But then he twisted and shot Little Bird in the leg. Enraged, I swung my whip's elk antler handle hard against his skull. The blow staggered him. I wrenched the rifle from his back as he slumped to the ground, leaving him there. The surge of warriors carried me onward. I now held a soldier's rifle, useless without cartridges. I saw 3 cavalrymen break away, galloping back up the valley. Cheyenne and Sioux riders pursued them. They later told the story. One soldier vanished into riverside trees. Another was cornered and slain in a gully. The last man made a desperate stand in the brush near Reno Creek, fighting fiercely until he fell. Meanwhile, others chased down a war bonnet scout allied with the soldiers, killing him after a running gunfight. I missed that. I was swept into the chaos at the river, where warriors swarmed the banks, clubbing and shooting the floundering troopers. I never knew how many died there. I clubbed 2 soldiers from their saddles with my stolen rifle, sending them into the current. While most stopped at the river, I pushed across. On the far bank I saw Whirlwind, a Cheyenne, and a war bonnet scout kill each other in a point-blank exchange. Nearby, a second scout was pinned behind a sagebrush mound, taking shots. We flanked him, a bullet found him, and as we closed in, I smashed his skull with my rifle barrel. Others finished him. I claimed his longer gun, but gave it to a begging Sioux warrior who took the dead man's ammo without sharing. I walked away with nothing. Back across the river, I learned of the heavy losses. The news was grim. I joined a group moving north to the soldiers' original position. From a hilltop, I fired my new rifle aimlessly into the distant mass below. Then a shout. "Look! More soldiers!" I saw them on far-off hills downstream. Warriors peeled away to respond. I chose the valley route, skidding down the slope, fording the river, and weaving through the camps to our Cheyenne circle. Our camp was half empty, most having fled. Only my father remained. I told him of the battle, the scout I helped kill, and gave him looted tobacco. When I showed him the rifle and cartridges, he nodded. "You fought bravely. Rest now." I refused. "This gun makes me stronger. I'm going back." "Your horse is spent," he argued. "I'll take the other one." With a sigh, he blessed my second horse with protective medicine. I did the same for myself. Across the river, the new battle raged. My father gripped my arm. "Your brother's already there. Must both my sons risk themselves? You've no shield. Hang back. Shoot from afar." Nearby, 2 younger warriors hesitated. I jangled my cartridges, boasting of our spoils, guns, tobacco, a dead man's clothes. Their hesitation vanished. They joined me as we forded the river, merging with a wave of warriors. We spurred up the valley. As we neared the fight, the mass dissolved. Though everyone arrived on horseback, most now dismounted, creeping forward on foot through gullies. Yet hundreds still crisscrossed the battlefield, some charging recklessly before the soldiers' lines to prove their courage. I followed Cheyenne fighters up a gully. More warriors pressed the soldiers' eastern flank. Though we fought alongside Sioux, the soldiers were now trapped on a ridge. Earlier, scattered shots had been harmless, but now we swarmed the slopes. We used the land itself as our weapon, gullies and sagebrush for cover. While gunfire forced a warrior to expose himself, our arrows fell silently from the sky, finding their marks in men and horses. For 90 minutes, this deadly dance continued. We were ghosts in the brush. They were exposed on the ridge. Then a shift. About 40 soldiers broke away, charging toward a deep gully hiding a mass of Cheyenne and Oglala. As the soldiers dismounted, the chief lame white man rallied us. "Turn back! We can finish them all." But the soldiers broke first. They turned their guns on themselves. By the time we reached them, every man was dead by his own hand. I circled east to where the main force had been. They were all corpses. Warriors said most had killed each other or themselves. One Cheyenne described a lone soldier, his horse exhausted, raising his revolver to his own temple as pursuers closed in. I joined the final surround on the slope. I fired 2 shots before stopping. Too many of our men were swarming, risking friendly fire. Then these soldiers too descended into madness, turning their weapons on themselves. None survived. When one soldier broke and ran north, hidden warriors cut him off. He paused, then took his own life. A young boy raced down to claim the revolver before returning to safety. A warrior scalped the body, leaving the trophy on the sagebrush like a grim banner. As I surveyed the field, a two-spirit warrior grabbed my arm. "There, the soldier chief!" But a cloud of dust from stampeding horses swallowed the moment, and the chance to identify Custer was lost in the chaos. The final charge began. I saw a Sioux warrior stumble from the fight, his entire lower jaw shot away. The horrific sight made me vomit. I never learned what became of him. For most of the long battle, I heeded my father's counsel, staying on my horse and circling at a distance. I only dismounted briefly to help repel the charge toward the river. Afterward, I rode to a gully near the ridge's end. The last soldiers were trapped, using their dead horses for cover. Hundreds of us silently closed in. From the gully, I had a clear view and fired toward their position. A Sioux in a war bonnet ahead of me was shot clean through the forehead as he rose to fire. Suddenly, a lone soldier on horseback burst from hiding, galloping desperately eastward. A group of Sioux gave chase, and I assumed they killed him. Then the soldier's gunfire stopped. A shout went up that all were dead, triggering a chaotic surge forward. The scene was a frenzied cloud of dust and violence. It was said these last soldiers also turned their guns on themselves. In the eerie silence that followed, one supposedly dead soldier propped himself up on an elbow, looking utterly dazed. A startled Sioux warrior seized the man's own pistol and shot him through the head. I believe he was the final casualty, a stout man with a black, curled mustache. Another body drew much attention, now stripped and headless, with intricate blue and red tattoos covering his chest and arms. Some thought he might be the leader, but no one knew for sure. Moving through the carnage, one fair-bearded soldier with exceptionally long yellow hair caught my eye. I carefully scalped him, preserving the beard, and mounted it on an arrow shaft as a grim trophy. Then came word that my childhood friend, Noisy Walking, was badly wounded. I found him in a gully, pale, and insisting he felt fine, but bearing 3 bullet wounds and multiple stab injuries. Moving east, I found a body that was nearly hidden and missing its scalp. Something felt familiar. My brother and I made a grim discovery. It was our own war chief, Lame White Man. His fine clothes were untouched, suggesting a Sioux ally had mistaken him for an enemy in the chaos. A single bullet and multiple stab wounds had killed him. We discreetly covered him with a blanket, and his family came for him soon after. The joy of victory faded as the wails of mourning women filled the air. On the field, we saw the soldiers' strange markings and stripes, which we assumed were their form of war medicine. Our own preparations had been sacred. Our horses wore simple tack, and our men fought in their finest regalia, none of them naked. We found metal bottles of whiskey among the dead, a foreign concept that had disastrous results for those who sampled it. While we first credited our medicine men for the soldiers' self-destruction, I later understood the true cause. From a high-ranking soldier, I took a leather packet containing strange green papers, keeping the holder as a trophy. By afternoon, I left the field wearing ill-fitting captured clothes and carrying my macabre trophy, the bearded scalp, on an arrow. My grandmother was horrified when I gave it to her. I shared one whiskey bottle with friends. Another made Little Hawk violently ill. A commotion erupted near Arrow's All-Gone camp. Sioux warriors had surrounded newly arrived Indians, accusing them of collaborating. The voice of Chief Little Wolf thundered over the crowd. "I am all Cheyenne!" Yellow Horse pushed me forward to translate. I found Little Wolf standing proudly with his band. "You foolish boy," he said, his eyes flashing. "Would I bring women and children to join soldiers?" He explained they had seen the soldiers, traveled cautiously through the night, and only approached when the fighting was over. After I translated, he was declared innocent. His women smoothed the remaining tension by distributing precious sugar and coffee. That afternoon, we conducted sacred burials. I helped bury Lame White Man with the honors of a chief, wrapping his body in robes and sealing his tomb with stones on a sheltered hillside. His mother remained to mourn as we departed. Following custom, the tribes began relocating. Our Cheyenne moved downstream, while the Sioux retreated toward the western hills. The camps, which had been nearly emptied during the fighting, were now crowded with returning refugees. The initial attack had been a chaos of evacuation. Families snatched what they could, many taking shelter on the high benches to watch the battle unfold. Only when the outcome was certain did a cautious relief settle in. Women worked tirelessly, building temporary shelters and keeping bundles packed, ready to flee again. For those in mourning, tradition demanded sacrifice. Lodges were torn down or burned, possessions cast away. They would live as guests under the open sky, their grief raw and visible. Even the travois that carried the dead were broken. At dusk I visited Noisy Walking. He lay frail beneath a willow dome, his breathing labored. "How are you?" I asked. "Good," he whispered. "Only I want water." I told him he was brave, but the words felt small. When he begged again for water, his father, White Bull, refused with a cracked voice, not out of cruelty, but because a medicine man knows when a sip can hasten the end. I stayed until I could bear no more, leaving with a heart heavier than the coming night. No victory songs rang out that evening. Instead, the camps were filled with the muffled cries of mourning women and the low chant of prayers. Mothers and sisters gashed their limbs in ritual sorrow. The usual fires were few, lit only for cooking or for solemnly burning the dead's belongings. While some young men still skirmished with the surviving soldiers across the river, others returned weary. 5 of us took turns scouting through the night. We crept to the bluffs and saw the soldiers huddled below. We could have fired, but our duty was to watch, not provoke. When I was relieved, I didn't seek my family. I simply turned my horse loose and collapsed into a patch of grass, my exhaustion deeper than the dew. The land itself held its breath, waiting for dawn. This is but one thread in the tapestry of that day, a story not of triumph alone, but of sacrifice, vigilance, and the enduring spirit of our people. We left the battlefield with our dead, and the soldiers with theirs. But some things were left behind, unanswered. Why did Custer's men fall into madness, turning their guns on themselves? Who was the soldier with the yellow beard, whose face I still remember when I close my eyes? And in all that chaos and smoke, did any of us truly lay eyes on the famous Longhair himself before he was gone? These are the mysteries that were whispered around our campfires. The same mysteries historians still debate today. I have given you my testimony. Now the story is yours. Tell me in the comments, what do you believe happened on that ridge?